in my mind, that what you're trying to do is use a narrative, a story, as the peanut butter to smuggle in a payload, which is the pill.
Yeah.
So after the sweetness of the story disappears, there's got to be something left. And that's why we're quite mindful of saying it's not just about story by itself, but story
Sure.
is a very meaningful component to telling it.
It's not that people hate presentations, it's that people hate crappy presentations. That's what today's Ask an Expert says. Hi, I'm Joshua Carlson, co-founder of Propelo Media, and today I sit down with Rich Mulholland. Rich started an agency over 20 years ago, and the premise is about helping organizations and individuals develop and give better presentations. Missing Link is a company that keeps it real, and today we're keeping it very real. He's going to give you the 4 pillars that you need to know when developing a presentation. He's going to talk about his passion for board games and how that has actually helped him professionally. And finally, he's going to tell you how you can develop a presentation that will make people take action. Now let's hear what Rich has to say. Rich, thanks for coming on our Ask an Expert segment.
It is absolutely my pleasure. I've been looking forward to it.
Okay, well, I'd like to start off. We actually had to reschedule this because you've been invited to a pretty interesting webinar. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so like on Monday, I got an invitation to my email, and it was come to watch a talk with the matriarch of the Musk family. That was the opening line. I thought, okay, well, this has my attention, and I'm always curious. We're in the public speaking space. I always like to see other speakers, and I've never come across her at all. And
Sure.
so it's a talk by Elon Musk's mum, by the looks of things, who was a very, very, seems famous model at one stage and a nutritionist now. So I was intrigued enough to ask you if we could move this out an hour. I can let you know how it goes if it was worth the move.
Okay, well, we'll circle back around with you and see how that presentation went. So to get started with our actual conversation, you guys have a line, I've heard it say, people don't like presentations, or people think they don't like presentations, but what they don't like is crappy presentations. And Missing Link, your company, is born to solve that problem. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I always say to people that I think we were lied to in this idea of doing what you love. I think that's a crock. I think that's not the entrepreneurial way. We don't do what we love. We do what we hate, and we fix problems or we fill gaps. And in my past, I used to work in staging. I
Okay.
toured with bands and things. And in the off season, I worked in corporates, and I saw how terrible people were at presentations.
Yeah.
And I realized like any idiot can put together a presentation. And I started a company, Missing Link, because so many idiots do. And so that was the kind of the departure point. That was it. Is I just figured, right, this is so widely bad and there's such abuse of human attention
Yep.
that it's got to be a meaningful problem worth solving. And the truth was, when we started the company, I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew that nobody else did either. So I just put up my hand and said, hey, I'll do it. So that was it. I'm trying to rid the world of terrible presentation, which I think is a worthwhile thing to solve.
Yeah, I think so too. As an audience member that sat through a number of them, I appreciate your efforts. So I want to talk about the bones of a presentation. So from my standpoint, it seems like we've got a multiple components, and I want to get your insight on this. But I think we have a story, right? We have the visual, and we have the storyteller. Is there other component of a good presentation that we need to take into consideration?
I mean, there's other elements that go together to making it meaningful. We
Sure.
talk, funny enough, in the exact same order about the same 3 things. We say that you write a good talk before you design one, before you deliver one. So the same way that you said the story, the visual, the delivery, it, the writing a good talk isn't always storytelling. All right, it's not.
Okay.
I think people emphasize the idea of story, and we can maybe explore that. What I mean about that. And also, obviously, not all great talks have visuals. Malcolm Gladwell is one of my favorite speakers. He doesn't use visuals as such.
Yeah.
Although that said, I think that there's certain points that could be improved by, when he describes a battlefield with where the general came in and what's going on and what they're doing, it would have been really helpful for me if he just showed a picture of the battlefield. He's asked me to do all this mental gymnastics, but he is, first and foremost, a writer and a storyteller. So
Sure.
I love the magic of it. And then, of course, there's the delivery. And I think a lot of good presentation lives and dies on the fringes, on how well is it written and how well is it delivered. And so our job is to try and solve for that.
So let's talk about the first part of it, how you actually create the story. What is the process to developing a good story?
Okay, so again, let's address the story issue straight off the bat, because it's not necessarily for me about doing the story as such, right? It's about something else to that. So let's go for story for a second. Um, I used to have this boxer, this dog. His name was Murphy. He was amazing, and he was the most obedient dog that I've ever known in my life. Like, it was absolutely incredible, and he would do anything. I did man work training with him. I did agility training with him. He would, like, I could put him in a sit, so he wouldn't take food from anybody else, and he would just wait there for me. And I'd put food down, and he would wait. And he was so obedient. There was only one thing that dog could not do, and it was take medicine. If I tried to give that dog a pill, if the dog was sick and I tried to put a pill in that dog's mouth, he would fight me. Like, he would not do it. He would spit it out. You could not get this dog to take medicine. Now, as human beings, we've evolved to figure this out, right? So we know that if you take, and I don't know how you guys do it over there, but in South Africa, we take peanut butter.
Okay.
And we'll take like a blob of peanut butter and we'll put the pill inside the peanut butter and we'll put it and we'll give it to the dog. Now, even then, you got to learn, you got to create some excitement. So I would take the peanut butter, give him a little bit, and then I'd take a blob of it and I'd put it down and I'd say, wait, wait, wait. And he'd eventually say, okay, Murphy, take it. And he'd run and he'd eat the peanut butter. So here's the thing. In presentations, your story is the peanut butter. Now, what people do sometimes is they'll get onto stage and they'll tell this incredible story. And everyone leaves and like, that is an amazing story, but there's no point. There's no pill. So our job is to fix a problem an audience has. And there's kind of two problems we have. Some people stand up and they just give the data and the facts and the numbers. They force feed the medicine. And the audience doesn't walk away with it because it's just too bitter a pill for them to swallow.
Right.
And other speakers, they stand up and they tell a good story. Let me tell you the story of my life. I was some great sports person that did this, or I once climbed this great mountain with one leg, while fighting tuberculosis. And that's, good story, bro. Like, thanks, man. I appreciate it. But like, all you've given me is motivation, which is a very fleeting cognitive resource. Like, it's, I get upset in traffic on the way home, the motivation is gone.
Right.
So in my mind, what you're trying to do is use a narrative, a story, as the peanut butter to smuggle in a payload, which is the pill. So after the sweetness of the story disappears, there's got to be something left. And that's why we're quite mindful of saying it's not just about story by itself, but story is a very meaningful component to telling it.
Okay.
So in order to do that, we have to start, and this brings it back to the process point you asked. And feel free to jump in anytime if I'm going off on a tangent here.
No, I like it.
But we have to then go back and say, okay, so what are we solving for? Now, we have 4 pillars in a presentation. This isn't to say it's the only structure that could work, but we think it's a perfectly good one that can work for every talk you give. That is step number 1, give them a reason to care. Okay. Step number 2, give them a reason to believe. Then you've got to tell them what they need to know. And then you've got to tell them what they need to do. Now, the path to creating a great talk is to work backwards through those. To start off and say, when I get off this stage, if my audience does not do X, I have failed.
Okay.
What is X? So figure out what you want them to do in that last step. And sometimes that might be you want them to join your email newsletter. That's fine, but that's uninteresting. What you want them to do is to go and make an action because you spoke. Because you said something to them today, they've got to be like, I want to go and do this. What is that? What is the big meaningful action you want them to take? Or in fact, what is the smallest action you can get them to take immediately in order to head them on the pathway to where your talk wants to take them? Then we've got to turn around and say, well, what information do they need to make that happen? Then we can kind of skip the next step for now, and we can say, so what problem would they have in the world? Could we convince them they have to make them want that information we spoke about before?
Yeah.
And then why should they trust you to give it to them? And those are the four building blocks of every talk. Get them in the wrong order though, and you fail. Most people, they stand up and they talk about themselves, then they try to give you information, and then they try to tell you what to do. And they forget to fill your gas tank, your give a shit tank. And we think that's a problem. That's what you got to do first with your audience. You're more than welcome to bleep that out. But the gas tank, the acronym doesn't work without the word shit.
No, I'm fluent in French, so we're good there.
C'est très bon.
I'm not that fluent in French.
Me neither. That's all I got.
Okay, perfect. So basically we have this order, but in order to develop the presentation, us as a speaker or as the organization, we need to actually reverse engineer that and start first and then work backwards from that. You're saying that's the process to take.
Yeah, you're always reverse engineering an audience action. So an action the audience will take in the future. And it's like one of those time movies where the audience does something and then it says 3 months before. Three
Yeah.
months before should be your talk, right? That should be what happens. And then 3 months later, the talk happens. But you got to picture the end of the movie first. What does that look like there and work backwards from there? To me, a presentation is very simple. It's two components. You want to deliver a message to achieve a result. Most people think it's the first part. I'm going to just tell you something. Nobody cares. Like seriously,
Right.
like I don't care. Why should I care about this? I only care insofar as about the end result, and I'll only care about that if you convince me that I should. And most people get that wrong.
Okay, well, so let's go back to you talked about Malcolm Gladwell. I love him. He could be more visual, right? So let's talk about visuals tactically. From a presentation standpoint, what are some of the platforms or tools that people should be looking at today to enhance their presentation? I mean, obviously, when we think presentation, everybody goes to PowerPoint. We've got Google Slides, and these are all functional, but are there other platforms that you recommend to enhance visually a presentation?
Can we agree that a Ferrari is a better car than I don't know, some crappy old Fiat one, for example, that's a 30-year-old Fiat?
Sure.
Cool. Can we agree that if you're a terrible driver in a Fiat, that the way to fix that isn't to put you in a Ferrari?
Yes.
Right. So I don't want to speak to you about improving your presentations with any tool until you can prove to me you're really good at doing it with PowerPoint. PowerPoint is a perfectly good, in fact, it's actually a phenomenally good tool that's badly used by people.
Okay.
Blaming PowerPoint for a bad presentation is like blaming a pan for a bad meal, right? Don't blame the pan, learn to cook. And that's what you have to do. So I use PowerPoint and like almost as a virtue of, I want to prove to you how good PowerPoint is as a tool, because actually it doesn't need to do much. It's just got to sit there in the background, minding its own business, going from slide to slide, serving up whatever information you give it. Once you learn how to design a good slide on PowerPoint, then you can go forward and try use more fancy tools like, for example, Prezi.
Okay.
But until you actually figure PowerPoint out, don't graduate from there. Because actually, first of all, on any stage you get into anywhere in the world, somebody has PowerPoint. So if your computer breaks, you're golden.
Right.
Second of all, even tools like we're on right now with Zoom has the ability for me to run PowerPoint built straight into it. So it's amazing. The only thing I will say to you right now in the world, because this is something as well that, and maybe we'll chat about this, maybe we won't, but I think people are missing the trick. As a public speaker, I thought, oh goodness, these lockdowns are going to be terrible. It's been the best thing ever because now I can do a world tour at lunch,
Right.
so, and then I can be home again. So there's more stages available to us now. So from an online presenting tool though, like without a doubt, the master stroke tool that I found the best hack is Prezi Video.
Mm.
Prezi Video allows you to import your PowerPoint file into Prezi and then I've actually got it set up here, using my little Stream Deck here, I can actually trigger up the slides to come in front of me. So they appear like a picture-in-picture. Now, a tool like is wanting to do that, but it wants to do a green screen background.
Right.
That's doing a lot more heavy lifting for your computer than you need to do, and you got to make sure your hair works. In this case, Prezi Video just brings your PowerPoint slide or your Prezi slide right up in front of you. It is golden, and every single time I do it in a talk, you can just see the audience eyes open up. They can't. How did you do that? That is magic. No, bro, it's like software for $20 a month. It's unbelievably good. And right now, people still aren't doing it, so you still get the benefit of being the one cool kid who knows this cool trick. You just found like the cool band before they were famous. I promise you, it's worth doing now. Crazy Video.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm definitely going to check it out. But I do like the metaphor that, hey, before we go buy expensive cookware, let's just learn how to cook in the pan that we have. So let's talk about that from a visual and from an architectural standpoint.
Awesome.
What are the tips or what are the recommendations you have to make a good slide?
Okay, so there's a couple of basic principles. I mean, one of them is, you've designed a good slide, not when there's nothing left to add, but when there's nothing left to take away. Okay, so that's one point. let's say you have to work, and I'm going to kind of just throw random concepts at you and we can jump onto them. But
Sure.
they're very simple concepts. So we work with large corporations and they'll say to us, oh, but we've got a brand identity, a corporate identity. Can you make the slides in our corporate identity? And we always say to them, no problem at all. Just do me a favor. Don't send us your PowerPoint corporate identity because it's terrible. Send us your billboard corporate identity. What is the corporate identity you send your ad agency for making a billboard? Because that's what your good slides are. Your good slide should work effectively in a free way on a billboard.
Right.
If you couldn't see your slide being effective when somebody's driving past it at 50 miles an hour on a highway, that big, then it's not a good slide. So just always look at every slide you made and say, would this work as a billboard? Yes. Cool. We're off to the races. So that's one thing.
Okay.
As when it comes down to the text and the visuals, your text and your visuals are doing two different jobs. I want you to imagine a book, and you know that picture in 1,000 words.
Yep.
The words, the title of your slide is the title of your book's chapter. The picture of your slide is the picture of the chapter itself. And often it is a picture that will not make sense until you've gone through the chapter. So a good slide lets the audience get involved. A good slide, I might show you a picture and I'll have some kind of content at the top. And a good slide might have an image here. So I might have a picture of an unhappy, let's say Murphy. And I want to talk to you about stories and presentations. And you see a photo of a dog that looks sick. And you don't really understand why that's there, and a jar of peanut butter. Now that's all that's on the image. Yeah. But as I go through, you start realizing, okay, hold on a second. I figure out what's going on here. I figure out the connection between this. Right. You as a speaker or a presenter, giving you your gift to your audience of letting them solve the riddle. So the slide should only make sense when you click out of it. So right at the point that you've got to the end of it, they're like this aha moment. They're like, yes, I get it. This makes perfect sense. Sure. The coming together of the title, why stories are not enough, and a picture of a boxer dog and a peanut butter sandwich all of a sudden make perfect sense. And the penny is dropped, but because they were invested in solving it, they'll never forget that message. If you force feed them everything at the beginning, hey, this is a picture of a dog and this is a line that says, don't give the dog the answer, blah, 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 and then you make them read that, that's going to be terrible.
Right.
So when in doubt though, just make sure you don't replicate things, and make sure that you just choose images that will make sense at the end of it. And also, and this is a very unpopular thing to say because it's supposed to be, we're not supposed to do it, but they're also reasonable breadcrumbs for you as the presenter.
Okay.
So the most important trick I can give anybody who's presenting is this: you have to see your next slide. Any which way you can manage it, you have to see your next slide. If you speak at any conference, they will put up the slide you're on in front of you. Yeah. You don't need it, right? You don't need another place to look at the slide you're on. What you need is somewhere to see where you're going, because it's that act of magic. You glance down at the slide so you know what's coming, and your job is to make sure that your slide follows you, not the other way around. So you see it's an image of a boxer dog, and you can see, okay, cool, I've got to get into the content about stories. But now I'm wrapping up my introduction about Elon Musk's mom. So what am I going to do there? So I might turn around and say, so, Elon Musk's mom is the matriarch of the Musk family, but of course, she's not going to tell us that story. The story she's going to tell us about how she built a modeling career, and about how she used that modeling career to launch into a world of nutrition in a new space that happens. And it's this story that's going to have us captivated. However, it's important that we understand that story by itself is not enough. There has to be more to it than just that. Click. And that's why I want to tell you a story of my own about my dog, Murphy. So I led into my slide already, leading up to that point, and then I click to advance. Most people, what they do is they just kind of go, so that's Elon Musk's mom. Click.
Yeah.
Let me tell you a story about my dog. So you must use visuals, and it makes it very clear that when you glance down, you can see exactly where you're going. A slide of 20 bullet points with a heading and 20 bullet points isn't going to help you because it looks just like the previous one.
Okay, so I have a question that, I've given a number of presentations, and I think I'm guilty as charged for a few of these things that we're talking about today. But in the back of my mind, one of the things that I've always wrestled with is putting just enough content in that slide for me to make it engaging so that I'm allowed the connection with the audience to be able to storytell, right? To give these points. But then I always think in the back of my mind, hey, after this is over, a lot of times people request to get the slides. And if I send these and they don't have my verbal narration, will they remember the key important points? What's your take on
Yes.
that?
If we were together right now, honestly, just I would ask your permission to give you a slap across the face, just to get it out of you. Okay, your job is not to write the book. Okay, so first of all, there's two easy fixes for this. So what I do is I say to them, guys, I can send you through these slides, which I will happily do. But more importantly, what I do is I say, I want to pick through the big summation slide and send you 5 things, those 5 key points, and you can present them to your team. And I'll give you a description of each of these, and you can download that as a PDF. Nobody needs your slides, even if they ask for your slides. Have you ever in your life, ever seen a keynote speaker? Oh, Tony Robbins, that was amazing. Send me your slides. Let me read about the passion of the power within. Nobody reads slides afterwards. So they ask for them, but actually what they just want is, how can I engage with you further and engage with your content?
Right.
So what do? I say to them, cool, here's the link to a service. I use QR Code Monkey, so they can put up their phone. It's a free app, and you can brand it and make it look nice. They take a photo of that. That sends them to SlideZen. So SlideZen is another free tool. I upload my slides to there, or a PDF of the most important slides, and some extra links to resources they can use. And then they give me their email address, they give me a speaker rating, and they can give me a testimonial that I can use in my future marketing. And then I invite them to join my email list, where I've then harvested some audience. They've got some content, but they also have permission to engage with me further. And I say to them, if you would like any more of the slides, reach out and I'll send them to you. But again, why would somebody want you creating bad slides so somebody else could read them? Doesn't make it better for them. Because if they want your slides, they should want to be presenting good slides anyway. So to me, it should be very simple. Separate the act of what they want to do with the slides afterwards, and make something custom for that, a nice document, a nice infographic or PDF.
Sure.
And then you deliver your best job. Because generally speaking, for me, I get paid to speak. My job is to be good when I'm there right now, not to give them lecture notes for afterwards. The fact that they want them, and in fact, a lot of my keynotes, when they ask for the slides, I just say no. I say, guys, what are you going to do with these? This is unmeaningful. However, I will send you a couple of chapters of a book, or one of my books, or whatever the topic is that they can get.
Sure. Okay. Well, love it. Good advice. We talked about this before. We talked about a month ago. You've got board games behind you. I would like to just talk about this. Where's your passion come from with those?
Well, there's an origin story. So when I was a kid, I played Dungeons and Dragons, which is like a storytelling game. And then after school, I played a game called Magic the Gathering, and I fell in love with that. And then I started my business, and I kind of got busy. And then about 10 years ago, I reignited my passion with board games, and I started playing them more and more. Now I've got 1,000 of them, and I have a board game group. But here's what I realized just over this lockdown period, was that I thought I loved games, but I realized that, so for the last few years, I'd been out to the day-to-day running of my business. And last year I spoke in 26 countries. I was traveling around the world. It was fantastic. But it's not, delivering a talk isn't as intellectual as you would think. Writing talks can be deeply, thinky and doing things, but delivering them is just kind of performing. You're doing work. And I think I'd started to get quite bored. And my brain needs to be solving something. As an entrepreneur, I think we always fix a problem or fill a gap, and we try to solve meaningful problems. And I think that I'd run out of meaningful problems to solve. And when I was reintroduced to board games, behind me, basically what it is a wall of problems worth solving and fun problems to solve. And the only reason this aha moment happened was after lockdown, when my business was basically obliterated. We work with corporations trying to help them deliver talks, or work with public speakers trying to help them grow their business of public speaking. And everybody's gigs were canceled, and my speaking gigs were canceled. So all of a sudden I was sucked back into the business to try and fix it. And it got exciting again. And I fell in love with my business, because my business was in a crappy space. And
Sure.
this coronavirus thing attacked the shadows of my business where the rubbish was hiding. And it was like it actually got rid of so much of the stuff we hated. But the last thing I feel like doing when I finish work these days is play a game. And that was a weird moment for me. I realized that this is my canary in the coal mine. Anytime that I find myself wanting to play games, like once a week with my family, that's amazing, or with my friends every second week. But if I find myself wanting to play games every day, that means that I've stopped solving meaningful problems at work. This will now forever be the canary in the coal mine for me to make sure, like, if that part of your brain isn't being fed at the office, you've hit that plateau and you need to get off that quickly and solve more meaningful problems there.
Well, so I think you answered my next question, which was, hey, what do games help us with business? And for you, I like the canary in the coal mine example, but I've noticed a lot, as I looked into your organization, in fact, you're holding a Rubik's Cube. Um, Games engagement seem to be a big part of your organization. Can you just talk about how these different structures, confines, they take us out of the normal paradigms of routine and get us thinking differently?
I mean, that's the answer. That is absolutely the answer. What you said there. For the sake of going into a bit more detail on it, there's in presentation, you understand the value of metaphor,
Mhm.
right? Of solving something in metaphor. If I want to explain something complex to you in your space, if I wanted to explain, say, banking to a banker, the worst thing I can do as an outsider is tell them, you know what's wrong with banking is this. Let me take you over. And I've got to lift them over like those Marine Corps beach drills, where they're climbing over and under. I've got to get them over and under all these obstacles. However, if it's a metaphor, I would say, I want to tell you a story. I want to tell you a story about engineering in the 1700s. And it's a fascinating story. So come with me, and I hold their hand and I walk them away from the first barrier.
Sure.
Then what I do is I walk them down the side of the barriers and I tell them a story that echoes their story, but they don't see it yet. Then what happens when I get to the very, very end of it? And then I say, should you see how this works in the 1700 engineering? So the banker's like, yes, absolutely. And then I walk them back to the end of the obstacle course. And then I say to them, and I look back at the obstacles and I say, so why would this be any different for you? Why is this different with banking? Because the way I see it is this. And now the burden falls on the banker to climb back over the obstacles in order to convince me. I've already done the heavy lifting. So
Right.
where does games work in this? Well, the worst kind of games that you can play, like if you were speaking to a property company, you might think, we've got to play Monopoly. No, it's a terrible idea because they'll just say this is a crappy game about Monopoly. Probably my favorite business game to play with people is a game about feudal Japan and the end of the Edo Empire, and it's called Jiraku. And it's a card game that there's almost no business principle that I don't think I can teach in this game called Jiraku.
Okay.
And it's phenomenal game, even though you won't see it. And the second game for that would be Tigris and Euphrates. If you play it, you'll be like, I don't know what this dude is talking about. However, there's certain principles at play. If you move too fast, you don't earn the honor you need. But if you move too slowly, then you miss seeing the emperor.
Right.
I would have to explain to you in more detail. Now, I'll sit and we run what we call victory condition sessions with companies. So we'll sit down with their leadership team and we'll say, guys, in order for us to help you, you have to make sure you know what work needs to be done. So we run through these game storm sessions, and I will play a game with the CEO and the head of strategy and maybe the COO, and my team will play with different parts of the leadership team, and we'll get them to play these games. And the first thing we'll do is we'll say to them this. We'll say to them, okay, do you agree? Let me ask you this. If I said to you, how'd you win this game? Or let's take Monopoly. How'd you win? What are the rules of Monopoly? You roll the dice, you move, you get it. Cool. You buy the property or things. Cool. Great. How do you win a game of Monopoly? Well, when everybody else loses their money, you've won. Cool. Let me ask you this. If I said to you, if instead of that, the rules are the same, but if you get to a different, if you go around the board just twice, and at the end of that, the player with the most green or the most of one property would win, would you play differently, do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So that's what I thought. If I said to you then, okay, we go around the board, just say 3 times instead, and the player with the best distribution of property colors would win, would you make different decisions?
Of
The
course.
answer is yes.
Yeah.
So I say, so can we all agree that it's the victory condition that dictates how you play the game, not the rules? The rules are actually just a mechanism that helps you understand the boundaries, but actually it's how winning looks that predicts the game. And they
Right.
say, yes, totally. And I say, cool, do me a favor. In front of you all is a Sharpie and a Post-it note. Write down for me what the victory condition of your business, this big bank, this 40,000 employees, is at the end of this year. Don't confer. Write down what the victory condition of this organization is by the end of this year.
Sure.
And then they go through and then I say to them, and we come back, and of course they never have the same answers. And I say to them, guys, so here's the thing: you've just told me that the decisions you make are based on the type of game you or the victory condition you have, and yet you're all playing a different game, and that's problematic. So we say that you're confusing moving forwards with moving towards. Once we get them there, we can work with them on what the right presentation and communication strategy is. Then what we do, though, is we use the metaphor of the games to help them understand. So in this game, if this was you and this was this, how would this work within that space? And we help them play that there. But really, it's just an excuse for me to get to play board games during the day and get paid for it.
I like it. Way to engineer your passion into your profit.
Totally.
So I assume you have another organization, 21 Tanks, which I'm assuming is actually part of you going into these companies and talking to them, because it seems like it's
that's where the facilitation works.
Yeah.
So the facilitation happens in 21 Tanks.
So where did 21 Tanks come from? What is the metaphor? What is the naming scheme here?
Okay, so the origin story was that people kept on saying to me when I started Missing Link, they would say things like, hey, we know this isn't what you do, but would you come in and help us? Because you've got the right brain, we've got this creative problem, would you come in and help us solve it? And what I realized was this universal truth that any group of smart people struggling with an innovation-based problem, it's never because they're not smart, it's always because they're too smart. And to quote my friend Howard Mann, he says, it's hard to read the label from inside the bottle. So we started 21 Tanks as a perspective lab. And the idea was basically, it's a think tank, but we also help them roll the concept out in their business. So it's not about just having the idea, it's about building habits around your business, and we'll try to help you put them in place. And of course, the way to do that was with Missing Link or other business would help you communicate this new thinking to your team and to help roll out there. So in some way, 21 Tanks solves a problem of its own, but in another way, it serves as a really great lead magnet for Missing Link, which is our core business. Sure. We also do quite a lot of functional team building, which is that I was frustrated that we would run a big conference for a company, create all of this content for them on day one, but then on day two, they do a trust fall or climb a wall or paint a picture. And I was like, surely there's got to be a way that the fun team building stuff you can do in day two helps drive it in the content specifically we created in day one.
Day one, right.
So we try to create a more functional, and it's less about team building, it's more about bond building, because I do think there's something to that. You meet a person at a conference and you do an escape room together, and 6 years later, you still have that bond you've built. It's not going to build the team, right? No one's fixing that there. So we try and help with this concept of bond building, but it's functional, built around the content that we've created. So how can the fun day two stuff be aligned with the day one content that we're working with?
Okay. So thinking and staying in the 21 Tanks area, you've already addressed one thing, which is, I think, a problem in businesses is that there's just not alignment, right? There's not talking, this person isn't making sure that we're moving towards the same goal because we've got different goals. What are other common problems that you guys are seeing today with businesses, especially because we're just in a really volatile time right now?
Well, right now, and I guess this goes, again, it stems from 21 Tanks, but it's certainly more of it in my Missing Link head, I think, is that people are not leading loud. So there's this common misconception for me, right, that leaders listen. And I get it. It's nice. Yeah, beautiful. I absolutely love it. Totally, you must say it. A good leader listens more. You have 2 ears and one mouth, lead that way. And I'm like, no, like, show me a leader. Show me, picture any single great leader in history. And I will show you a picture of them with their fist in the air, speaking to a gathered mass of thousands. Right. By all means, listen a lot to be informed, but make sure that you are leading loud afterwards. And what is happening to me during this whole situation we're in right now is that a lot of leaders are they've hidden away, and they've got the ability to communicate more to their teams, but they're doing it less. And actually, people need more vocal leadership now than they ever have before, and that's critical.
What are examples, aside from vocal leadership, what are examples of companies that are doing right now, specifically as it pertains to reaching out to their customer base? Because I think leadership, when we think leadership, we think primarily, internal employees, getting everybody rallied, which is incredibly important right now. But what about looking outwards, whether it's marketing or whether it's PR? What are ways that we should be communicating to our customer or potential customer bases?
So there's a company in South Africa, a big bank, and we're not working with them as much as we'd like. I just kind of on the fringes. So this isn't some case of me doing some great work that we've done. They've done this all by themselves.
Okay.
But what I thought was incredible is they were dealing with, they work with the brokers, so a wealth management division of a big bank.
Okay.
And they're very successful business. They do the kind of a few areas. One of the big areas is when you buy a home through them, and they sell you the insurance, but they also do the wealth management. Now, in the past, they did 4 big broker events, and they got on average on a roadshow around the country, and they got on average 500 brokers per event.
Okay.
I spoke to the CEO the other day, and he said they're now doing an event a week to the brokers. They're bringing the best information they can from what they found in the world, because there's so much information out there. They've stopped talking about COVID-19 because it's uninteresting. They're talking about business stuff that they can use today. And they're hosting a weekly event to 1,000 brokers at a time minimum they're getting on their calls, weekly events to 1,000, and they're giving them all the tools they can use to go out there and sell. And I thought that is leading loud. That is saying, hey, because of course, help me help you. It's the Jerry Maguire effect. You come onto this call, we'll give you this information, and ultimately, if you're doing well, we'll do well. So they've just gone out there and they've said, well, our access to audience is greater than ever before. And when I said to him, I spoke to the CEO and I said to him, dude, like, do you think that this will continue afterwards? And he said, sure. He said, we might do it less, but we'll never go back to what we had before. We're never going back to quarterly roadshows. We may have those as well, but this is so much better. Sure. So they've turned on a machine and they've accelerated a level of conversation with their people, and they've used communication to empower them. Now, I'm sure there's lots of spaces, lots of cases in different spaces, but obviously I care about leaders that present, and that's like the stuff that gets me excited. So I just thought, like, I actually went back to our team and I was frustrated because I said, how come we've been, taken to school in this way by one of our banker clients? Like, we should be leading this. But I just thought it was a great example, and I've been trying to see to our other customers that, and again, they didn't do anything fancy, by the way. That was it as well. I engaged with them on a call saying, like, dude, like, we've got to do this amazing big content. But he kind of came back to me, and to paraphrase what he said in a quote by this guy that we've been working with, Greg Hickman, he said, start simple, get ninja later. He said, they don't need great slides. They don't need a good presentation. It doesn't need to be perfect. They just need us to get the information they need to them as quickly as possible. You're not going to solve the problem any better by doing it pretty for us. This isn't supposed to be that. We'll still work with you on the other things, but right now, these guys just need the information, and we're getting it to them the best way we can. And it was a big insight for me. We try to make everything fancy, but sometimes it doesn't have to be.
Well, I like that because I think that there's a lot of organizations, specifically in the content space, and this is pre-COVID, post-COVID, this is forever. So they know they should be doing content, but they don't do anything because they think about the fancy first, right? They think about, hey, how is this going to be interesting to people, rather than just being like, hey, you have good information, start sharing it. Like, you'll get better at it, right? We started this show that we're on right now 4 months ago. The first show sucked. I mean, I can say that wholeheartedly. And they've gotten better and better and more interesting, but it wouldn't have gotten to this place today if we didn't just start at the beginning by just distributing information.
Completely agree. And that's what they did out the gates. Everybody else tried to wait until they could get webinars perfect. They were like, no, man, let's just do it. We can speak to everybody. And they're all nervous. All of our brokers are worried about, will they still have businesses in 6 months from now or 2 months from now? So they just communicated vocally and actively. And the thing is, they're getting better and better at it. In fact, the CEO I'm talking about, he sent me an email today giving me Have you seen, have you watched this guy on YouTube called Kevin Stravert? He has now gone out there trying to find presentation people, and he's sharing content with me. That's the kind of client I love. This guy now wants to get better at this, but we're I don't know, what are we in, 4 or 5 months into this thing?
Yeah.
And now this guy cares about this because now he can see the tremendous benefits that come from it. But that didn't stop him from starting. He started first, ready, fire, aim. That's
Right.
what he did. And I thought it was great.
Okay, so I have a question, and I don't know how much of involvement you guys have, but coming up with a presentation is good, but like, how do we build the audience behind it? Is it as simple as what this bank is doing, which is, hey, let's start it, let's be consistent, or is there a process that we think that companies should employ to say, hey, we have this great presentation? I've talked to a guy, he said he's given a presentation 1,000 times. And his presentation is really solid. It's really good. It's packed. And so it just kind of built upon itself. But are there strategies to kind of get the word out to help share these presentations?
Yeah, totally. I mean, we would call what he's talking about there his trademark talk.
Yeah.
That's the talk that he can do in his sleep. And there's a lot of benefits to those things. And I think that every speaker, our Story to Stage program, basically, it's funny. And I want to be aware that I want to talk about it just because in this case, it makes sense. This is not meant to be a sales pitch to anybody.
Sure.
The reason most public speakers fail is exactly what you spoke about there. It's not that they don't have a good trademark talk, it's that they don't understand that there's more to building a business than having a good product.
Right.
Right? The world is full of unsuccessful speakers with great talks.
Yeah.
Right? And they're frustrated with themselves because they're in the shadows. And of the 9 modules we take people through in Story to Stage, only like 2 or 3 of them are around the content. The rest of them are around building authority. Now, the most important thing that we do in module number 1 is get people, and maybe this is different, well, even with businesses, to narrow their area of authority right down. Don't try own marketing. That's difficult.
Yeah.
Owning design is a little bit less difficult, but owning presentation design, that's much easier.
Right.
So in the world of presentation designers, I know all the companies, like they all know us, right? All the big presentations in the company have heard of Missing Link, and we've heard of all of them because it's so far down the funnel that it's easy for me to build authority here.
Sure.
If I had to try and build the same level of authority as a marketer, then I better have written a New York Times best-selling book.
Right.
So own a more meaningful part of the problem. That's not to say, by the way, don't be a marketing company and sell those services.
Yeah.
But the conversation that you have with your customers around getting them through the door should be around a specific problem in the world that you don't think they've solved. The difference is people always talk about, and let's go back to marketing, they talk about their USP, unique selling proposition. Is that the term that translates over there, right?
Yep.
We don't think that's interesting. We think your UPS, the unique problem only you can solve. So our job is always, again, sell the problem, sell the accident, the ambulance sells itself. So your job when you go in the door is to convince the client that there is a problem, and the problem, the biggest thing that they're trying to solve is not solved generically in the sphere of marketing. It's solved specifically in this one area, which just so happens to be that one area that you've built your entire business model around.
Right.
As soon as you get them to nod to the part of the problem where they're like, oh my God, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. That is the problem we solve. You've won. Because you're now convincing them, you've narrowed the field from a 5-horse race to a 4-horse race. You versus the best of the other 4. So that's how you amplify your audience, is you solve a more meaningful part of the problem and you convince your customers you have it. The third book I wrote is a little ebook. It's like 40 pages long. It's called Story Seller. And it's actually at storyseller.co.za if anyone wants it. But that book is like a very quick, you read it in a weekend. You read it in an afternoon. But that explains that theory to you. And I think that's so critical, is you need to narrow down your area of authority, then amplify the strength of your authority in that space. That's why people fail. They try to be generalists. And I get that we should be generalists, but they try to own the space of generalists from a marketing point of view, and nobody cares.
Yeah, I love that because it reminds me of IKEA, the furniture company. Everybody thinks of them as this global behemoth. They're actually a fraction of the overall furniture space, but they own flat packaging, like flat furniture. Like that is the market, the narrow niche that they want. And it's huge. It can be huge, but they focused on being narrow.
I am literally adding that to my notes for the program. I think it's absolutely an amazing insight. I know this makes for terrible podcasting listening to me type, but there we go. That
Yeah.
absolutely, that's a perfect example of narrowing the authority down to an area, flat packaging,
Yep.
and then owning on a global scale your authority. So they don't talk about furniture, they talk about that.
Right.
And that's what most, I think, public speakers fail to do. And the other thing that people fail to do is they think their story is interesting, and nobody cares about your story. They only care about their own story, and the only way you become meaningful is if you can meaningfully interrupt it. So if you can turn around and say, "Hey, I'm going to become an important part in the credits of the movie of your life by helping you do this," people care. But the fact that you climb Kilimanjaro on one leg, while fighting tuberculosis is uninteresting to them. It's
Right.
only interesting if that can help them, something in that story can help them solve a problem they have in their business or their marriage or whatever the case may be.
Sure.
Otherwise, you're just selling motivation. And there's two problems with that. One, it diminishes fast. But two, I can throw a stone right now and hit a motivational speaker. Right? Nobody needs to fly you halfway around to motivate them.
Right.
So that's not enough. That's got too much, too broad an area of impact.
Okay. Well, so we've covered a lot today. Is there anything that you think that we haven't talked about that you think is important to share right now?
The only thing I would like to say is that I think that people are missing an opportunity, and there is a time right now because the access, just as I said to you, I'm joining this webinar just now to watch the matriarch of the Musk family to speak. This is not something that would have been possible before. If I'd been invited to an event later on, I would not have been able to go to Johannesburg to see this. I wouldn't be able to make the diary work, but now we can do it. There are more stages available. There's more audience available to you now than at any other point to any other human being in human history. Right? Your access to audience has been greater than it's ever been before, but you're not taking it. I believe that this missed access to audience is the greatest marketing opportunity that most businesses are not taking. There's also, I think Brene Brown said that uncertainty can be weaponized. There's uncertainty everywhere. And if you have one small little way of helping people solve all the meaningful stuff that's going on, the big meaty problems that they're having in their life, the upswing for you will be great. And then the second point is this: the heroes of every generation are created at the genesis problems of that current generation. We talk about millennials and this and this. Millennials, we should never use that term again. It was unmeaningful. But COVID survivors as a generation, that's something that's meaningful. We are different because we're COVID-ennials, right? And everyone, my dad is different because he's a COVID-ennial, and I'm different because I need to come up with a better word than that. That's a crappy word. But COVIDites, right? As a COVIDite, as a survivor of COVID, I have learned certain things. I have lifted my geographical anchor. I'm doing work around the world, and I now understand the separation between work and living from a geography point of view.
Yeah.
Every COVIDite in the world has now this next generation of thinkers. If you can help them solve a problem, what I'm saying is that the heroes of the next 10 years will be the people who speak up now. And it's amazing to me that people aren't doing it. That's why I love that you started this cast.
Yeah.
Right at the point where this mattered, you decided to have a voice. And I think that you will absolutely benefit from it, because people are looking for somebody else to help them shine the light in the right way. And you said, pick me. I think it's incredible.
And I'm glad you picked to come on the show, because we got a lot of insightful, especially I'm selfishly going to be taking notes. I'm going to rewatch this and definitely reevaluate my presentations. But I appreciate you coming on, because I think there's a lot of meaningful things that, that our audience can benefit from.
Thank you. Well, I very much appreciate you having me and the time and attention of both you and your audience.
Thank you, Rich.